All right, let's get right into this. I want you to picture Paris in the 1920s. You know the scene, right? It's the Jazz Age. The city is just electric with creative energy, a golden age for artists, writers, and anyone with a dream. But underneath all that glitter, a poison was spreading, a hidden plague that was threatening to swallow the city's brightest minds whole. And that was the real question, wasn't it? See, heroin didn't arrive in the Bohemian neighborhoods looking like a monster. No. It came with this seductive whisper, promising artists a key to unlock their genius. But all it delivered was destruction. So, seriously, how do you fight an enemy that looks so beautiful?
And this really gets to the heart of the city's paradox. On one hand, you've got this incredible paradise of artistic freedom. But on the other, those very same cafés, these supposed sanctuaries for creativity, were being turned into hunting grounds. Dealers were actually weaponizing the idea of creativity to find their next victims.
But something was starting to happen. A resistance was forming. And it didn't start with some loud declaration of war. Not at all. It began with the quiet, careful observations of a few really remarkable women who started to see the patterns that pretty much everyone else was missing.
And what came out of this was, well, it was a distinctly female response. While so many men, often driven by this reckless ambition, fell right into the trap, a lot of the women started developing something totally unprecedented, a systematic, intelligent approach to just surviving. This wasn't about being lucky. This was about strategy.
So let's meet the women who started it all. First, you have Marie Dubois. She was a painter, yeah, but she had the mind of a scientist. In her journal, she was documenting the decline of her friends and colleagues with this chilling precision. Then there was Isabelle Moreau, a journalist who just knew there was a dark story hiding underneath all the glamour. Well, when these two happened to meet at a gallery, their skills, Marie's artistic observation and Isabelle's journalistic investigation, they just clicked. And that spark created the foundation of a powerful new alliance.
And just like that, the Sisterhood of Shadows was born. Now, this wasn't some formal club with membership cards and a secret handshake. No way. It was a secret, underground network forged purely out of necessity. It was all about sharing intelligence, watching each other's backs, and figuring out how to keep creating their art without risking their lives.
So, how did they do it? Their whole strategy really boiled down to three core ideas. First, information was everything. They didn't go trying to fight the dealers head-on. They studied them. They learned their methods. Second, it was all about teamwork over individual heroics. They knew that survival meant they had to have each other's backs. And third, they fiercely protected their art. They refused to give it up, but they found smarter, safer ways to create.
So this started as a defensive network, but it quickly grew into something so much more ambitious. The Sisterhood actually started building an entirely new infrastructure, a kind of parallel world, hidden right there in plain sight.
And this, right here, is the absolute genius of their approach. Think about it. They didn't just run away from the dangerous cafes and salons. They built their own safe ones. They created a whole alternative cultural scene that gave people all the creative community they were craving, just without the predators. And their growth was just explosive. I mean, in 1923, it's just a few women sharing warnings. A year later, by 1924, it's a full-blown intelligence operation with its own network of safe venues. And by 1925, they're basically a social service organization that's so effective, it's in direct competition with organized crime for influence in the city. Incredible.
And maybe their most brilliant innovation was something they called protective recruitment. They actually studied how the criminals targeted vulnerable newcomers, and then they just beat them to it. They'd identify an at-risk artist the moment they arrived in Paris and immediately plug them into a safe community, before the predators even knew they were there.
But, that level of success does not go unnoticed. The criminal networks started to realize that their entire business model was being systematically taken apart. So they decided to fight back, and the shadow war was about to escalate dramatically.
You see, their very effectiveness made them a target. The response from the criminal networks was swift, it was sophisticated, and it was absolutely ruthless. The Sisterhood had gone from avoiding a threat to becoming the threat.
The criminals came at them from all sides. They used intimidation, sending anonymous threats to leaders like Marie Dubois. They used disinformation, spreading these nasty rumors that the Sisterhood was just some boring, conservative group trying to stamp out authentic art. And, maybe the most insidious tactic of all, they used infiltration, planting their own people inside to sabotage the safe spaces from within.
Which brings up a huge question, right? The Sisterhood was a grassroots movement of artists and writers. How on earth could they possibly defend themselves against a professional sabotage campaign being run by organized crime?
Well, they answered with brilliant counterintelligence of their own. Marie Dubois came up with something called the 3 conversation test. A newcomer would have 3 separate, totally casual chats with different members of the Sisterhood. The idea was, an infiltrator who's just playing a role, they're bound to slip up, their stories won't quite match, and boom, they're exposed. It was operational security woven seamlessly into a social evening, just genius.
But the fight kept forcing them to evolve, and they started taking on their most dangerous work yet. They moved beyond just prevention and into active rescue missions. A nurse named Louise Girard began to lead what they called extraction protocols, literally pulling women out who were already trapped by the networks. This was a whole new level of risk. And the stakes just got even higher. The criminals realized that the most powerful weapon the Sisterhood had were the stories from the women they rescued. So they resorted to kidnapping. They began systematically abducting key members to silence them and try to destroy the network's credibility. It had gone from a shadow war to open warfare. Faced with a threat that could have wiped them out, the Sisterhood leveled up again. Defensively, they created new protocols to make themselves harder targets, always varying their routines, learning to spot surveillance. But they also went on the offensive. They started feeding their incredible intelligence to law enforcement, helping the police take apart the entire criminal syndicate from the very top down. And this two-pronged strategy, it worked. They survived, and they won. But the real legacy wasn't just about winning a shadow war in 1920s Paris. It was about discovering these universal principles of protection and community that would soon ripple out across the world.
Their impact was just profound. They pioneered new kinds of social innovation, new models for how a community can be resilient in the face of a threat. They actually wrote the book on universal principles of protection against exploitation. And their methods? They inspired international networks, with women in London, Berlin, Vienna, all adapting these strategies to fight their own local battles.
Ultimately, their entire legacy really comes down to this one single powerful truth. It proves that real power doesn't have to come from the top down. They showed the world that the most effective, the most brilliant solutions often come from the very communities being targeted, using their unique first-hand knowledge to protect themselves and build something better in its place.
And that is exactly why their story hits so hard today. Sure, their enemy was a drug epidemic back in the 1920s, but we face our own hidden epidemics, don't we? Disinformation, online exploitation, social isolation. So their story leaves us with this final, really urgent question. Who is building the sisterhoods that we need right now to fight the battles we're facing today?